Poker 105. How to play No Limit Hold'em Preflop. No Limit Hold'em is such a deep game that it's impossible to give precise instructions like you might see on a Blackjack Basic Strategy chart. Some of the things that affect your decisions preflop include your hand, your position, your stack, the blind and ante structure, how many players are left to act, how they play, how big their stacks are, your image, if it's a tournament, any payout considerations. There are many preflop charts you can get online to study, and they can take into account some but not all of the above factors, and we do recommend that you do that. Very little of what we say here will be applicable to all situations. All that said, let's lay some fundamentals. There are 5 hand types that we're going to define as playable. Big pairs, that's aces, kings, queens, and jacks. 2 big cards, any 2 that would add up to 20 or 21 in blackjack. Small and medium pairs, pocket tens through deuces. Suited aces, that's where the second card is the same suit as your ace. And suited connectors, all the way down to 5-4 suited. You can use all these hands to raise if no one has yet raised, or they can be used to call a single raise on the button or in the big blind. Let's talk about the common situations you'll face pre-flop. If you're the first person to voluntarily put money in the pot, always raise, never limp. Raise 3 times the big blind in cash games, or 2.5 times the big blind in tournaments. Do not vary the size of your raise based on the quality of your hand. If someone limps in front of you, you can also limp, but preferably raise and add 1 big blind to your raise for every limper. If you are facing a single raise, re-raise with big pairs and ace-king. It's fine to call with any of the playable hands on the button or in the big blind, but new players almost always call too much. Try re-raising or 3-betting at least some of the time with ace-5 through ace-deuce suited and suited connectors. Think about it this way. If your opponent knows that you will only re-raise with jacks or better and ace-king, think how easy it would be to play against you with only 5 hands to consider. Adding some smaller cards into your 3-betting range will give you coverage, which we'll talk about in the post-flop section. Don't re-raise with small pairs. Use these to set mine. You'll make 3 of a kind 1 in 8 or 9 times, and you might win a big pot. They can also sometimes win a showdown unimproved. When you re-raise, make it big enough that your opponent will have to consider folding trashy hands that could draw out on you. Many novices min-raise, which is a mistake. If you will be in position after the flop, raise 3 times the opponent's bet. If you will be out of position after the flop, raise 4 times the opponent's bet. If there are any limpers, add 1 big blind for each limper. Facing a raise and a call. This is the setup for the infamous squeeze play. Try raising here often. The player who called probably doesn't have a great hand. The player who raised might have a good hand, but he can't be sure of what the caller will do. And if both players fold, you make almost double what you would have made by getting a single raiser to fold. If you do decide to call, it should only be when you can close out the action, meaning no one can squeeze you. This is usually in the big blind. If there are multiple callers, so much the better. Increase your raise size by the amount of all those calls. Facing 2 raises. Now things are serious. If you cold call a 3-bet, the original raiser may raise again. And you're against at least 2 players who like their hand. So you must be very cautious. A safe recommendation is to put in a raise with aces, kings, queens, and ace-king, and fold everything else. If you get 3-bet or more. Stack depth and your opponent's tendencies become very important, so it's hard to give generic advice in this situation. But here goes anyway. Don't fold aces or kings. Try to be the person who goes all in with ace-king, rather than calling all in. If you will be out of position after the flop, lean heavily towards raising or folding. Short stack situations usually found in tournaments. With 10 big blinds or less, you will usually go all in rather than raising the normal amount. With 20 big blinds or less, rather than 3-betting the normal amount, you'll usually go all in. If you are getting 2-to-1 or better, you almost have to call all in. If you are getting 3-to-1 or better, you must call. When approaching the bubble of a tournament, focus on making that important milestone. Otherwise, don't worry too much about surviving in a tournament. Additional hands. If you feel the list we gave you earlier is not enough hands to play, or you have a good reason to loosen up, try adding suited 1-gappers down to 6-4 suited, king-high suited hands, and unsuited connectors down to 5-4 offsuit. The worst hands. Famously, 7-deuce offsuit is the worst hand in No Limit Hold'em. It cannot use both cards in a flush or straight, and it has bad pair potential. 1 big card and 1 little card is also very bad. For example, Jack 4 offsuit, the flat tire, may be even worse than 7-2 in many situations. Consider your miracle scenario where 2 jacks appear on the board. Your opponent may have the last jack with a better kicker, and if your opponent doesn't have a jack, he may give you credit for a playable hand like Ace Jack, King Jack, Queen Jack, or Jack 10, and you won't get paid. Conclusion. You now have a good idea what hands to play and how to handle the most common preflop situations. Don't miss our next course, Poker 106, How to Play No Limit Hold'em Post-Flop. Thanks for listening, and as always, please gamble responsibly.